Welcome to Books to Africa on Air, where we talk about interesting topics with a special focus on Africa. My name is Precious Sango, and I am your host today. And here with me is Katie. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Precious.
Katie is the author of this book, The Pretender. Very interesting. I have read it, and I must say it's a good read. I think it's a good read. So,
Thank
Katie,
you.
why the title, The Pretender?
So that's actually quite an interesting question. I don't know, what kind of music are you into, Precious?
I'm into also. So basically, I'm into gospels.
Yeah.
Mainly gospels at the
Yeah.
moment. Yes.
When I was a teenager, I was really into my kind of punk, rock music.
Yeah.
And so when I came to write this book, I was really struggling for a title. I was thinking The Pretend Princess, the Pretenders, but then there's a band called The Pretenders. And I was really struggling for a really punchy kind of title. And I was driving back home one day, and on the radio came one of my favourite bands called the Foo Fighters. And they have a song called The Pretender. And I was sat there going, and I looked at the kind of name of it, and I was like, The Pretender. I was like, that's it.
Oh, wow.
And that's how it came, but I had been really struggling beforehand.
Yeah.
So
How long were you struggling?
probably a good few weeks, but it was like the deadline for when I had to have it was coming up, and I literally probably had a few days left before I had to have a title. So yeah, I kind of felt like it was a bit of divine intervention there.
Yeah, that's quite interesting because you've been struggling with something, and then it comes on.
And it was so
through a
obvious.
song or-
It was the most obvious of all the things I'd been thinking of. I was
Yeah.
like, why didn't I think of it before? But I didn't.
So, tell us a little bit about you, Katie.
Okay.
So where you're from?
Yeah, so my name's Katie Ward, and I'm originally from Devon.
Okay.
So born and brought up in the UK. I've always wanted to be a writer ever since I was really little. So my friends will tell you that I've been going on about it since I was at least like 9 years old.
Yeah.
And I originally did journalism at university, and that's what I was going to go into.
Yeah.
And then I decided to move to Dublin, and that's when I'd kind of started to think maybe I want to do writing. And then when I was over there, that's when I kind of did a course at the Irish Writers Museum, an Irish Writers Centre, and that's where I really developed my first novel. This is the second one that's been written, but the first one published. And that's where I really developed the kind of sense of style, the style that I've got, is where that kind of came from.
The book is quite good in terms of the writing.
Thank you.
So in terms of reactions for the book, what sort of reactions have you been getting?
It's extremely positive.
Yeah.
So I've gotten really, really good reviews. So when I first published, I did a UK blog tour, which is where effectively is a bit like X Factor, where you send it out and people read it and then they come back and critique it on Twitter or Instagram. So very public, and they're very honest. They don't know you. They have no reason to be polite or say things they don't mean. And it was really nerve-wracking, but it came back really, really positive. So some of the feedback that I've got is that people really like the characters, the characterization. They like that there's a real consequence and actions kind of theme. They like the interaction between the two main characters.
Yes.
They think it would make a really good film, and they basically just really like the fact that it's a classic adaptation, but that it's completely new.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said they don't think that they don't feel like they've read the story before.
Yeah, it is quite new, I think, and a different perspective, you would say, from the original one.
Yeah.
And just want you to tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to take this different perspective.
So I actually really love classic fiction. So that's one of my favourite kind of areas. So Wuthering Heights, Woman in White, and Prince and the Pauper.
Yeah.
So I was originally given a copy of The Prince and the Pauper when I was 10 by my aunt for the long journey back down from Scotland to Devon. And I just absolutely loved it. And then a few years ago, I kind of felt like there wasn't much around about The Prince and the Pauper. Like, it's a really well-known story, but I don't think the original story was ever really told. So a lot of people focus on the switching places. That's quite common. But actually, the wider story was actually about social justice, placing yourself in the shoes of another and seeing something from a different perspective, which that to me was the real story.
Yeah.
And then it was 2015. I actually thought I could wait for someone else to write this, or I could be the one to write this and bring it really modern day, because the original story's never really been modernized properly, and I thought I'm going to be the one to do it.
It's quite a bold step. Yeah. Obviously, you had a job as well as writing the book. So, what was the driving force then, and that encouraged you to write this book? Because it's not easy to write a book whilst you have another job, full-time job.
And it's really hard to take on such a classic. And am I going to be able to do it justice? But for me, it was a bit about preserving the original story, because it's obviously, I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's based in Tudor England, and the language is difficult to read, and a teenager's not going to pick it up and want to read it anymore. So I thought, it's such a great story, let's put it in a way that makes it accessible for them, and then they can actually carry on that story, and you give life to that story, but in like a way that people would engage with.
Yes, and have you seen any reaction from teenagers yet?
Yeah.
How was it?
So they're actually the kind of the young adult market, which it's aimed at, actually are the ones that really like the actions and consequences theme almost the most. And actually they've come out and said that they don't think that that's something that they would always think of, and it was nice to kind of read it and to actually know that things do have consequences, and actually seeing how one little kind of decision actually has a massive impact later on.
Yeah, that's quite good, because today, I mean, we were saying earlier in terms of this action consequences, it's not really emphasized in today's society. I mean, do you hope that this would sort of help to make people aware of it a bit more, or think about it a bit more today?
Yes, I would, because I actually think of all the life lessons that your parents instill into you, I was always like, well, if that's the consequence of what you've just done, you need to live with it. And so I was always kind of had that drilled into me, and I actually think it's one of the best things that I was taught, because actually now I think about things and I think about what I do, and I'm aware of my actions on other people. Whereas I think if you don't have that, you might not mean to be hurtful, but it flows naturally if you don't think about what you do.
From a parent's perspective, that's quite reassuring, because if you've equipped your children or your daughter or son with that sort of ability to be aware of that actions have consequences, then you're rest assured if, for example, you leave them to their own tools, as you say, when they go off to school or to university, you're not worrying in terms of how they would be treating other people or what they would be up to, but because you know that you've instilled this value sort of in them. So I think that's one of the things that is very prominent in the book. I think that's one of the things that I liked as well. But something else that I wanted to highlight is the fact that someone in Africa, for example, or a less developed country than the UK or America, wherever, might be thinking, oh, they wish they had a swapped life, just like the characters obviously in the book. And they'd want to come here, because they might think the UK is all rosy, you can easily get jobs, you have money, you don't have to work for it as such. What do you think? I mean, someone reading that book and sort of desiring this other life and wishing they swapped,
I could see how they might think that in over there, and I wouldn't. Obviously, I think anyone in the UK knows life's not fully rosy over here. I know my life hasn't been, but I think what I would like them to really take from it is maybe, not necessarily think about swapping lives, but like how they can better themselves with the opportunities that they can kind of create for themselves. So I think the main premise of this book is that the pauper and the princess have the same destiny, and that's something I kind of believe in. I know that there's a lot said about poor and rich, but I actually think that there's a lot that can be done on both sides of it, and so I think I would really like them to kind of take from it that actually, if I work really hard, I go to school and I get an education behind me, I can be the princess. Because actually, as much as the pauper and is very poor, actually there's a lot of people with those traits that would maybe be richer. It's not necessarily about monetary kind of is about a situation that she finds herself in, really. So yeah, that's what I'd like them to take from it, and I think that they would probably, like that kind of stance on the story.
Yeah, I think so as well. And it's quite good that you mentioned education, because it's quite powerful, education. I mean, I think it's one of the best gifts you can give someone is education, and the knowledge they get from reading a book, or the new perspective or ways of doing things. And that's what we try to do at Books to Africa, in terms of sending books to people who need them. So in terms of that, how do you use, because Katie has been a good supporter of Books to Africa, so she donated some of her books to us, which we will be sending to some students in Africa. So how do you think their reaction would be then, in terms of reading your book? And obviously it's all new and stuff.
So I think my motivation for wanting to support Books to Africa is that I wanted to give the children out there who wouldn't have access to books easily, I wanted them to have an experience of what it's like to not just have a book, but a brand new book that's not for someone else and then given to them, but it's actually just for them. And we're going to sign some, aren't we? So I can send to them as well.
Personal touch.
So I'm really excited about that. But I think originally I just thought that they would be a nice story that they can read, and that they can kind of engage to. I do have like kind of one of the characters is from a Jamaican heritage, so I kind of felt like it's hopefully they could see maybe themselves in it as well, and relate to it, and just basically maybe get to the point where they think, oh, actually there's a lot of opportunity out there for me, and actually I could do this. And whether they want to come to the UK to work in the future, or whether they want to stay there and do something locally, anything's possible. So that's what I hope that they would take from it. But I would like more than anything for them to just love it, really.
Yeah, I think it's quite good that you included someone from a Jamaican heritage, because usually, some books, especially, recent books that talk about, the pauper, the rich and all that, they tend not to be very diverse in terms of, people from other groups, Jamaicans or people from Africa. So what made you want to include someone from Jamaica heritage?
So I have one of our close family friends when I was young is Jamaican. So that's why I chose Jamaica. But I wanted to include more diversity. So I think from my perspective, obviously I don't know a lot about racism or experiences of that side, but I can see from my perspective what it looks like. And there is a big discrepancy between, people in power and their ethnicity. And I've kind of challenged that a little in this book. So the Jamaican character goes into a position of power. His mother, she's there. His father dies at a young age, but she's a very powerful woman. She's not, weak. She's not kind of someone who needs help. She's very strong, and she's very on top of her game. And then I've got other characters. One's from Vietnam descent, and I put them as the police commissioner, because actually we don't have that. We don't, like in the UK, they're all the same kind of race. And actually I wanted to challenge that and put these people in those positions of power, because that's not what they would normally be put in literature. So
I think that's quite good. I like the empowering aspect of it, because Books to Africa, the idea we have is also to empower the people that we're giving books to. So obviously we don't want to be sending money to them, but we want to send books to them which will enable them to have a good quality education. And we believe that education can bring you out of poverty and a generation, a society. So in that sense, your book is quite empowering to individuals who would read them as well. So in terms of the question I asked earlier about someone coming here and wishing they would have a swapped life and come here in the UK and have it all rosy, I think it's quite good what you said. And hopefully when they read your book, and hopefully they get the moral of it at the end, and the message that you can do something where you are as well. It doesn't always have to be to leave.
You don't have to, because I agree very much with your principles. I think education is key. I think if you give money to one family, you help one family. You educate a town, they pull themselves out of poverty. And I think that is almost the way charities are kind of going now with that sustainable approach. And I think that's a real massive step forward. And I'm really excited to seeing that kind of in years to come, those children that are reading this book, suddenly seeing them in those positions where they've really poured themselves out and helping others do that. I've whenever I've met African people who've done well for themselves, they've always given back that way. And that's something that I've really noticed that's really lovely, is that when they do get into a position where they can help, they do help. So I would say that those children would definitely help the others.
Definitely. And on to the question on how you became aware of Books to Africa. How did you find out about us?
So it was, I basically just Googled. So I had done a series.
To Google, then.
Yeah, I had done a series of Christmas markets, and it's the first time I've seen how children reacted to the book, and they absolutely, their eyes lit up and they loved it, and it was really exciting. And I kind of sat there thinking, oh, this has been amazing. And then I start to think, what happens if they can't afford? Like for the people that can't afford it, and then I kind of felt like they're going to miss out. And that's how I kind of decided I wanted to donate some books to a cause. And I remember hearing about initiatives where they send books to Africa, thinking there's got to be one in the UK somewhere. And so I Googled, and you guys were pretty much the only charity that I could find that did it. So I'm glad that you did do it, because I was excited about sending my books over there.
That's good then.
Yeah.
And what are you hoping to achieve apart from the reaction you got from, you know, the students, the ones you met?
No, they were just with their parents, like Christmas shopping.
Yeah. So apart from the reaction, what else were you hoping to gain from sending these books to Africa?
So basically, the motivation that made me really want to send it is I want to give them the same experience that those children had. So when they came to my stall and they picked up the book and they were able to have a brand new book and read it. So I decided I wanted to send them over to Africa, brand new books, never been used, so that they could have exactly the same experience. So they could know what it's like to hold a new book, what it smells like, that no one else has touched it, it's not got any stains on it, and know that it's kind of, you know, for them, not charitable, if you like, you know, it's a present.
In terms of obviously talking to someone in Africa, for example, because this is your first published book.
That's correct.
So thinking about the process you went through to get to this point, what would be your advice, I guess, to them, to you know, a 10-year-old or someone who, like you said, you were given a book when you were 10, you know, and I'm sure that played a prominent in the fact that it got you through and you wanted to write a book about that. So let's say someone who gets your book, or someone who has a memory of a book when they were 10 that is motivating them to want to write about a story, either a story in their life or just something. How would you encourage them to go and write that book, even though they have other commitments?
I would just encourage them to just keep doing it, because it's not easy when you've got all of the other commitments. You come home, you're tired, then the last thing you want to do is start writing. But I think what's nice about what I know of the literary world is that whatever your story, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter your background. If you've got a good story to tell, people will read it. And I think it's hard to know that until you've gone through this process. But once you've gone through that process and you see that people, and actually somebody from, you know, an African kind of setting where they've come from, like maybe a poverty setting, into, you know, kind of being well established, that would make an amazing story. You know, they are living what would make amazing stories. And so it's have that confidence. And there were lots of times when I didn't know how to make things happen. I was trying to go through the traditional routes, but just think outside the box. Do you know what I mean? I think what's meant to be will be. And it's not always about what you can do, it's what you come into contact with, who you meet, and how they can help you too. So, you know, look for the opportunities, because they won't necessarily present as a massive opportunity, but there might be a stepping stone. So.
And when you mentioned not going through the traditional routes, what examples would that be, and what would be the examples of going, you know, thinking outside the box?
So the traditional route is going through a getting an agent, getting a publisher, you get an advance, and then they kind of do all of the promotion and everything like that. Whereas with me, I've done this, they call it authorpreneurs, where you take it as your business. So I've done the same process. I've got an illustrator, an editor, but I'm in charge of basically selling and promoting. And this whole book has been produced by myself and to my standards. And, you know, the cover illustration is my idea that my illustrator obviously drew. And for years, I was waiting for someone to give me that opportunity to say, I believe in your book and we will publish it for you. And then last year, I just had this moment when I was like, why am I convincing other people to believe in something I already believe in? And so I just went for it. And I was like, I have no idea what this is going to, how this is going to work. And I still don't really know, but I know people love it. And I know that it's got really good reviews. And I know that it's what I've always wanted to do. And it's gone from being my dream to being my business. So
that's what I can take from that. It's you had that moment, you know, what you said about why am I going to be convincing someone or other people when I already believe in it and when you can do it. So basically, you're doing it yourself. And so I guess what I would want you to do is sort of encourage someone who is out there who is thinking that they don't have the right tools. So I'm thinking someone in Africa who doesn't have access to internet, for example. Maybe they have access to 1 or 2 books, but they might have access to social media on their phone. How would you advise them to place themselves in the right position to get to this level at least, or to get something?
To be honest, it would start if they've got a phone, just write down the chapters on notes, you know, like what you've got. And if you haven't got a phone, just write it on paper or anything that you've got, even if it's in your head and you know, just map it out so that you've got it. And then hopefully if you're in a position, because you will need obviously to go down the self-publish route, you'll need to have internet, but keep that in there until you're in that position. And then you can go to someone, you can either type it up or get it typed up, and you can go down that route yourself. I mean, I did it like where I paid a lot for the illustrator and the editor, but you don't need to go down that. There's ways to make it more cost effective. And initially what I did before I did any of that was put it online to see whether people liked it, to see what feedback I got. And it was read thousands of times in 65 countries. One of them was Iraq, so it was quite interesting. But the point is, there's lots of things to get your writing out there, and if you haven't got the money to actually go the full way yourself, put it on one of those forums, get people to like the concept, and once you've got that, and you can prove that, then you could be in a position where people might say, actually, we'll take this off you now. You know, we'll publish this because you've shown that you've got a lot of following and people like it.
And what would you say, obviously these are some of the pros, you mentioned some of the pros of being a self-publisher, but what about the disadvantages or the cons?
There is lots. I mean, it's difficult. It's really, really tough. And if you want an easy route, go the traditional route, because although it's not easy to get an agent and a publisher, you know, it's easier than doing everything yourself. In terms of, I've had to learn about advertising. I don't know if you know, but Amazon's like an auction. You have to understand that process. I had to set up for distribution. I had to get hold of how am I going to get into Waterstones, who distributes. That was all very interesting. And in terms of, I don't have experience, you know, in publishing. So I've had to kind of feel my way. So in terms of like even the cover of the book, I was like, what would I like to see on there? And I was like, it's not about me. So I went out to my readers and I said, here's the options, you choose. Because I don't actually have the knowledge of the market. So I actually put it out to them, and I've incorporated them, and I got people to read it and to be really brutally honest about all the problems with it. And I think that's why it's come back and people really do like it, because I put that effort into it. So there's ways around it, but it is tricky. And if you think it's on top of a day job, you know, I had no weekends. My friends didn't see me for ages. And it feels in the beginning like you're pouring money into something, But, you know, I'm in a position now where I've made back the money that I spent on it in a few months.
Yeah.
So it has worked out.
So it's worth it, I guess. The
Yeah.
disadvantages sort of not outweigh the advantages, but it's worth it in the end.
But you have to look at it like a business.
Yeah.
If I set up a shop, I would have a lot of outgoings.
Yeah.
And so these are considerably less than a shop. So, yeah, that's the way I look at it.
Oh, that's good. I think we're sort of running out of time a little bit.
Okay.
But would you like to read a section from your book?
Oh, yes.
Just to give them a glimpse into the book.
Yes, I had the section all set out, and then I actually have just lost it. So that one. So I'll read a section for you. Okay, I'll read it from here. Lying on my bed, I replay the evening's events. A sudden thought crosses my mind. Racing to the window, I look down at the ground outside my bedroom. It's not too far. Then before I can change my mind, I whip off my sheet and duvet cover, knotting them together along with a towel from my bathroom, attaching my homemade rope to a bar on my window. Tucking my credit card into my jeans pocket, I stand on a chair, climb out backwards, and carefully descend to the ground. Clinging to the rope, my heart pounds a million beats to the second. Once on the ground, my knees shake slightly as I set off into the night. The cool summer air surrounds me as I hurry towards the palace gates before somebody can stop me. I've no idea what I'll do when I'm on the other side of the gates, but I don't care. I want my freedom, and I won't take no for an answer. I'm an adult, aren't I? Surely I get to make my own decisions now. Just as I reach the gates, however, I see an unexpected sight. A slumped figure lies sobbing in front of them. I approach gingerly. Are you okay? I ask. The figure quickly rises, wiping away the tears before turning round to face me. I see that it's a frightened-looking girl around the same age as me. No, not really, I'm sorry. I had nowhere else to go, and this felt like the safest place to come. The girl seems sincere. Don't apologise, I say, not wanting to see her cry. Why do you have nowhere left to go? Can't you go home? Home? No, my father kicked me out. She pulls up her sleeve, and even in the shadows, I can make out the angry bruises covering her arms. That's dreadful, you poor thing. Wait there one moment, and I'll get someone to open the gates. I rush off to get help, feeling a buzz of excitement as to who this stranger could be. I return with a guard who dutifully opens the gate to let her in. Thank you, Michelle, I tell him. You may leave us now. As you wish, Your Royal Highness. The guard walks off as instructed. Isabella? Are you Princess Isabella? The girl asks, her eyes wide. Yes, that's right. Now I have a slight confession. You see, I climbed out of my bedroom window, so we'll need to get back in that way. Are you good at climbing? Immediately she responds with, well, I'm always up for a challenge. Let's put it that way, Your Highness.
I think it's a really good book.
Thank you.
Do you mind telling the audience how they would be able to purchase the book?
Yep. So The Pretender by Katie Ward is available on my Amazon page. So if you just put Katie Ward The Pretender, it will bring you to my amazon.co.uk page. You can also link it through my website, which is www.katiewardwriter.com.
Thanks, Katie, for joining us, and thank you for watching. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion, and please go out and buy the book, The Pretender. You can buy it from Amazon or from Katie's page. Yes, hope you enjoyed watching us, and we will see you at the next episode.
Every day, millions of good books are thrown away. Yet 50% of people who go to school in Africa will not be able to read or write properly because they have no books. Books to Africa collects donated books and send them to projects in Africa. You can donate your books, fund a container shipment to Africa, or become a dedicated sponsor. Please do not throw your books away. Go to www.bookstoafrica.org to get involved. Thank you.